Hello and welcome again to another installment of our Real Intelligence series. I'm Dwayne. This is where neuroscience meets melanin wellness. And we have just been having, I've been having such a interesting time of self-discovery as we're learning about the different functionalities of the brain and how to optimize these different areas. And I can't wait to kind of tell you a little bit about what I've been doing and some of the results I've been seeing. Well, today we're going to go into the executive suite. Okay, we're going to go and we're going to take a trip. And guess what? You all have passes. You know why? Because you all have it. We're going to take a trip to this front part of the brain where the executives sit. And the name of this area, or this area, is referred to as the frontal lobe. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at each of these different parts that make up the frontal lobe and their functionalities. And we're going to look at some other things as well that's all related to that. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so let's start off by giving this example here. You have a guy by the name of, we'll call him Oscar. And Oscar is someone who's in a brand new position at a high paying job, which is very demanding and all of that. And he's also a new father. So that means that he has duties as a father. You know, of course, he's a husband and all this stuff. So he's doing a lot of things. He's also like a coach and all of that at his, for his children's little league. He's doing all of these things, plus the responsibilities he has at work. And the type of job he has, of course, he has to be very meticulous. He has to make sure things are structured and in order. Now, that's just his job, but there still has to be a sense of order with everything else that I just mentioned as well. And so he's getting to this place. He's starting to notice where things are feeling a bit scattered, like he's beginning to forget some things. And, sometimes he's showing up late, it just, he has this sense of things are just not, it takes him a lot more effort to get things in order up here, right? So he was reading something, he found out that he should do this. So what he decided to do was to do 10 body squats, like body weight squats. And basically what that is that it's something like this. You put your, like this, literally like this, you're standing up and it's like you're squatting. Well, you are squatting as if you're going to sit down, but you're not actually sitting down on a chair. You're just squatting until your thighs come, are like aligned with like the floor. You know what I mean? Not that you're going all the way down to the floor, but it's even like with the floor. You understand? So it's like you're sitting down, but you're not sitting down all the way. And you do 10 of those. And then once you do that, once he started doing that, he just did 10 of them. Anything that he needed to do where he said it's going to require him some focus, he does those 10 squats. And once he does that, then he sits down. He was doing this for a month. After about a month, he started noticing some changes. He started noticing that he's starting to become more focused now. Well, what else did he do? And I'll explain to you in a moment what exactly is happening here. On top of that, before he got started with anything, he began to start writing things down, writing his goals down, and just what is he going to get accomplished today, or maybe some type of encouragement or something like that. And then after that, then he rolls into what he's going to do. Now, what's actually happening here is that when you're doing those types of exercises, in his case, he's doing those squats. For me, I'm actually doing push-ups. That's what I do. That blood is and oxygen, when you're moving like that, it is rushing to different parts of your brain, especially the frontal lobe area where the executive suite is. And when you're doing that, now it's like a refresh. That's what's happening. And so when you get that refresh, now all of a sudden you can start getting like pinpointed, exact, you're targeted, and you're going to begin to notice that you're not as scatterbrained as you once were. And this is something I'm doing now. Like I said, take away the squats. I'm doing push-ups. I'm doing on average, I do about 200 push-ups a day, 200 or more. And, I start off my day when I get off, as soon as I get up out of the bed, I'll just do some basic stretches, like I'm stretching down to my palms are flat with the floor, right? And I do that about 3 times. I'm stretching my legs. Then I do my push-ups. I do like 30 a piece. I'll do 30, 30. I have it broken up in 30s. Sometimes I'll go to 40 just so I can get it done or whatever. But I notice when I'm doing these push-ups, again, I'm feeling that blood and all that stuff starting to rush to my head and all of that. And I start feeling a lot more focused. And this is something I would encourage anybody to do. When you first wake up, don't just, well, you want to brush your teeth or whatever, you could do that first or not. But I would encourage you to do some type of stretching exercise that's going to involve getting that blood and that oxygen to your brain, because that's what's going to start getting you focused. And you're going to find that you're not going to be so reliant on that coffee rush, because you're going to already be focused. Okay, so now let's turn our attention to the frontal lobe. So I'm going to bring this up on the screen here, and we're going to go through each part, okay? All right, so I'll just look over here on my notes so make sure we're all on the same page here. So you have the prefrontal cortex. This is the long-range planning, focus, impulse brakes, okay? So your prefrontal cortex is right behind your forehead here. It's literally right behind there. All right, the next thing is going to be your primary motor cortex. That's the launch pad for voluntary muscle moves. Okay, that's your primary motor cortex. The next one is called Broca's area, and is usually in the left hemisphere. All right, this is where you get your speech production and word sequencing. All right, and then finally you have your orbital frontal cortex. This is where your emotional flavored decision and your gut checks. When you get those gut checks, when you're like, I don't know, just something about this. That's your orbital frontal cortex that's speaking. Okay. So those are those areas there. Remember, at the end, we're always going to have our little quiz. Okay. So let's continue. All right. So we're going to look at a couple of these sections here in a little more detail. Let's first and foremost, let's look at the prefrontal cortex. Well, this section is referred to as the executive. It's the project manager. Okay. This is where decisions are made. It weighs out options. It sets priorities, and it does something else here. It also dials down limbic impulses. Now, the reason why I'm kind of slowed down on that part, because the limbic system, we're going to talk about that. We may get into that a little bit later on, but that's where your amygdala and all that stuff, that's where your emotions and all that stuff, a lot of that is in that region of your brain. Again, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it dials it down. When the executive part, this prefrontal cortex, if that is not developed, in other words, you haven't really worked that executive, then what happens is it's too weak to dial down those limbic impulses. So when you get those impulses just to react on something, that fight or flight, or when you are ready to lash out in anger, or you ready to do something to somebody or whatever, you don't. And you notice that you see this oftentimes on, on YouTube or social media. You see people just losing it over the most dumbest of things. And you sit back and you watch, and it's like, bruh, it's not that big of a deal. Why are you losing it over that? The reason why is when you look at the brain, what's going on, the executive is asleep. The executive is there, but the executive is asleep because you have not challenged it. You haven't strengthened it. And if you're not giving it things to do, it's just going to sit back just like this and be like, oh, well, you just go on and amygdala, you go and take over. And the amygdala is like, okay, shoot, when we go, all right, tying your hair back and all that, and you ready to go. You know what I mean? That's what that limbic system, if you don't have good brain health, it throws things out of whack like that. And that's what we're talking about here, the proper nourishment and all that kind of stuff. So your executive has to always be on point. Always be on point. It's a very important part of your brain. Let's move to the next section. Okay, so just behind the prefrontal cortex, You have this other section that's referred to as the primary motor cortex. Now, the primary motor cortex, what that does is that it controls, it sends neuron codes to different parts of your body, like where your muscles are, especially, and it's sending signals. So when you're dancing or you're moving and you're doing just short, like movements like that, what's happening is it's like, think of them as pumps, your muscles as pumps. And when you're moving, you see how I'm doing all this right now? As you're moving, what's happening is it's pumping fresh blood and oxygen up here to your prefrontal cortex area. And what it's doing is energizing your brain. This is why it's so important to have an active lifestyle. When you're just sitting in front of a computer all day and there's little to no movement, this is where you're not going to get as much inspiration. You got people that sit in front of the computer all day and they're wondering why I don't feel inspired. Now you got every AI tool, you got every animation, you got all these things at your disposal, all these different pieces of software out here that where you can create a whole Disney cartoon, but you'll have people sitting in front of their computer and like, man, I just don't feel inspired. Well, a big part of that is because you're doing what? You're just sitting. You're not moving. So movement is very, very important. So throughout the day, do yourself a favor. Make sure you're incorporating some movement throughout the day, like getting up, work for a little bit, get up. You could do your stretches and all that, but take a walk around the corner, do something like that, or just do some stretches or something like that. And what that does is it's like energizing your brain, those neurons up there, so that when you sit back down, you're ready to rock and roll and you're ready to continue on with that inspiration and all that, because of those movements that are pumping that fresh blood and oxygen to those neurons, is refreshing it. So movement is very important. Let's get to the next part. All right, so for this next part, we're going to talk about neurochemical nudges. Planning tasks, what they do is they raise dopamine. I know many of you have heard that in your frontal area, the area that we're talking about. Think of dopamine as the yes, you can do this. You know what I mean? It's that nudge. That's what they call neurochemical nudges. So when you get in that rush of dopamine like that, it's like literally like your internal, we could do it, so that's something that what gets produced when you're moving around. Now, when it comes to herbs, which we'll talk about a little bit later, rosemary and moringa, these are very good when it comes to synthesizing, that dopamine and the iron and all of that in your blood. And it helps to promote that, so you definitely want to get that into your system, some moringa and some rosemary. But like I said, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And this is especially important for those of us who have darker skin, because again, we talked about that, when you look at the numbers, we tend to be on the low end of the scale of being almost deficient when it comes to vitamin D. And why? Because we're living a westernized lifestyle where, like I said, we get up in the morning, we're in a house that's covered, and then from there we jump in our cars that are blocking the UV rays of the sun. From the car, we go to the office or school, and then from there we come back out to the car, and that's it. So we're getting very little amount of vitamin D production going on there. So anything at all that's going to promote iron and synthesizing that dopamine and the iron in your blood and all of that, again, this is something that especially for us is very critical that we're doing this. That we're taking things like these herbs I just mentioned, like moringa and rosemary. I almost forgot. Look, I need to stand up too in a minute. Okay, so now we're at the part of our video where we're going to go through our word bank. Okay, so let's go through it. These are some terms that we just covered here in this video. So let's go. So first thing is prefrontal cortex. Again, what is the prefrontal cortex? That is the planning and focused hub. Okay, the next thing is the primary motor cortex. Okay, what is that? that sends movement commands. So that part of your brain is sending commands. Hey, listen, move your hands, do this, move your neck or whatever. That's your primary motor cortex. Okay, let's move to the next one. That is the Broca's area. Broca's area. That's the speech making zone. Okay, so that part of your brain that's responsible for what you're hearing right now. Okay, Broca's area. The next thing is dopamine. What is dopamine? Motivation, neural transmitter. Motivation, neural transmitter. All right. Then the following one is the executive function, and that's the brain's planning skill set. All right. So those terms, make sure you remember them because we're going to have a quiz. And I'm telling you right now, that's probably going to be on the test. Okay. Let's move on. All right. So like I told you, we're going to talk a little bit about these herbs and why they're so important. So the first thing is, let's talk about fresh rosemary. Okay. It contains carnosic acid, and it's shown to increase cerebral blood flow and to protect neurons. All right. So rosemary, very good. Very, very good. Okay. Moringa leaf. Moringa again, always popping up. Is rich in iron and B vitamins that aid in dopamine production. All right. So moringa, you want to get that moringa up in there because, again, you need that internal encouragement. Okay, so now we're at our section that we're going to call the Move and Live Challenge. Okay. All right. So the first thing is what we just mentioned earlier about the 10 squats, body squats that we mentioned earlier. Okay. Before you, like I said earlier, before you're planning any kind of task or something that you got to sit down and plan out, do those squats. You don't have to do those squats because I'm going to tell you again what I've been doing. Okay. Do those squats. And what that's going to do is going to it's going to start pushing that blood and that oxygen into your brain area, especially your prefrontal cortex that's sitting up there like, okay, come on now. I'm ready for some encouragement. I need some dopamine. Just like you saying, I need coffee. Well, your executive, his coffee or her coffee is a fresh cup of dopamine. All right. So don't close the dopamine shop. You sitting in line getting your Starbucks. Meanwhile, he's sitting up there looking at you like, bruh, where my dopamine shot? Just give me at least a cup. You know what I mean? It don't even have to be ice. Give me some dopamine. So how you going to give it dopamine? By doing things like squats. Now, what I've been doing, like I said, again, I've been doing those push-ups. I do 30, and I take a break. I do another 30. I take another break. I do another 30. And then throughout the day, I'm doing that 30, 30, 30, and I just keep doing it, until I hit my goal, which is at least 200. And so I notice every time I do that, it keeps me focused because throughout the day, you do feel like that ship is kind of like swaying a little bit, especially when you got things that you're trying to solve and problems you're trying to figure out. You start feeling it. And I also feel sometimes even my confidence, it's like start swaying along with it. But then when I sit down, I was like, nope, let me do my 30. I'll do my 30. After that, I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. And it's just like a quick shot. You know what I'm saying? So it could be push-ups. It could be walking. It could be stretching. Anything at all that's going to pump that fresh blood and oxygen up into your executive suite. You want to do that. Okay. Let's move on. All right. So the next thing, remember we talked about in the previous classes, brain journal. I hope you guys got some type of brain journal where you're sitting down and you're actually writing down some goals, some general goals, even just for that day. It doesn't have to be in 20 years, I'm going to be this or that or whatever, but just goals just for that day. Just get into the habit of making that kind of a regular thing, okay? Because the more you start doing that, it's going to become easier and you're literally going to start walking into that. You can't just casually say it. No, you got to make that a point, okay? And I'm going to show you that on our next point. Now, the challenge I want you to do is this. In your brain journal, you're going to write with your less dominant hand. Your less dominant hand. I was going to say left because for some people it's their right hand that's their less dominant hand. But I don't care if it's your right or your left, whatever hand you don't write with at all, That's referred to as your less dominant hand. And what I want you to do is to use that to start writing goals, and just some positive affirmations in your book. All right. I want you to start doing that. I'm actually going to put some things on the screen of what I've been doing. Since I've been doing this, I literally do this. You should do this. Spend at least 10 to 15 minutes a day doing this. So, I break it up. I'll start up in the morning and I'm writing down with my left hand. And then in the afternoon or late evening, I'll do it again. And I'm usually doing it, quite honestly. That's just a kind of a basic plan. But for me, I'm actually doing it throughout the day. My mouse, I've moved my mouse over to the left side of my keyboard. And so even when I'm brushing my teeth, I brush my teeth with my left hand. And I'm just doing things like that just to keep it going. And as I'm showing you some of these examples here, these are some of the things I'm practicing writing. Unfortunately, I don't know, I probably threw it out, but you should have seen some of the, when I first started, man, my writing was just, it was all scribbly, and I was just like, oh, this is just a joke. Now, I'm not supposed to write with my left hand. I'm only supposed to write with my right hand. No, your brain is equipped to work both hands. Your brain is equipped to do both of it. You may be born with a slight lean towards a certain your hand, or be it your right or your left, but your brain is fully capable of writing either with the left or the right hand. All right, you just have to exercise it, and the more you exercise that part of your brain, your least. So in my case, for example, my less dominant hand is my left hand. And by using this, what I'm doing is I am not necessarily energizing. I'm engaging the right side of my brain. You remember what we talked about, the right side? What's the right side? What is it? One of its specialties, or what does it lean towards? It tends to lean towards more the creative, big picture kind of stuff, right? And whereas your left side, or the left hemisphere, that's more the specifics and, following orders and step by step and all of that. As we said before, both sides of your brain, they handle both of those functionalities, but they tend to lean toward the right. Tends to be the big picture, looking at things on a wider perspective and imagining and creativity and all of that. It tends to lean that way. The left side, or the left hemisphere, it tends to lean more towards the more of the specifics and all of that. But they both do handle some parts of that functionality, so that's something to keep in mind. So that's what I'm doing. And as far as what I've been noticing, I think one of the things I've been noticing is I've become a lot more focused. And I definitely have learned that. And I'm just thinking, another thing that I've noticed is my memory's getting a little bit better. It is. What I did on ChatGPT is I actually asked ChatGPT to create a memory game for me, an interactive memory game, and it did. And so because I was thinking, I said, if this part of my brain is being engaged a lot more, I wonder, can I couple me writing with my less dominant hand and learning a new skill? And so I'm actually doing an experiment right now where I'm writing with that, and I'm also going to challenge myself once again to learn Spanish. So what I'm doing is later on, this memory game, because the memory game I have right now is just numbers, but I want to change it from numbers to Spanish words. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to see, so I'm just trying things out. But this is an opportune time. If you're practicing writing with your less dominant hand, you may also want to think of what are some things I can learn while I'm doing this, and just try it out, But it's definitely, by you exercising your less dominant hand, you are literally upgrading your brain. And so this is the best time in the world for you to start learning a new skill. Another suggestion they give is, if you have a rosemary plant, take that plant and just inhale it for like 60 seconds. They say that's a great thing to do. Like if you're just needing some kind of, get those memory cells like resparked, smell. They said take some a whiff of some rosemary. I'm thinking now, I'm like, man, I may get some rosemary oil, and do that as well. So you may want to try that out and let us know what happens, in the comments below. Okay, so now we're at the final part of our video today, and that is our quiz. I told you we're gonna do quizzes on this, and then when we get to the final part of this long series that we're doing, we're gonna have one big test. Okay, so you better be ready for it. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and read the questions off to you, and if you need to pause and go back and and check some things, go ahead and do it, okay? Because the goal is for you to learn. All right, so let's get to our first question. Which frontal lobe area fires first when you decide to raise your hand? Oh, that's an easy one. I'll read it again. Which frontal lobe area fires first when you decide to raise your hand? Okay, number 2, true or false? True or false? A quick burst of movement can sharpen prefrontal focus. True or false? A quick burst of movement can sharpen prefrontal focus. All right. Number 3, Broca's area mainly handles A, balance, B, speech, or C, vision. Broca's area mainly handles A, balance, B, speech, or C, vision. All right. Number 4, name 2 nutrients in moringa that support frontal lobe chemistry. Name 2 nutrients in moringa that support frontal lobe chemistry. And then finally, what everyday smell may boost word recall? What everyday smell may boost word recall? All right, there you go. So next week, we're going to learn about the parietal lobe. It's known as the map. So I'm very excited about that. Do me a favor, if you have any questions, or maybe it's something that you're learning as well with this, put it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, you guys. Listen, you guys take care, and we'll see you the next time.